Hello, and welcome back to another newscast. My name is Debbie Foote, and I'll be your anchor tonight to tell you about the Bay of Pigs invasion. The Bay of Pigs invasion was a failed military invasion of Cuba undertaken by the CIA-sponsored paramilitary group Brigade 256 on April 17, 1961. A counter-revolutionary military trained and funded by the United States government Central Intelligence Agency, Brigade 256 funded the armed wing of the Democratic Revolutionary Front and intended to overthrow the revolutionary left-wing government of Fidel Castro. Launched from Guatemala, the invading force was defeated within 3 days by the Cuban armed forces under the direct command of Prime Minister Fidel Castro. The Cuban Revolution of 1949 to 1956 saw President Fulgencio Batista oust. He was replaced by a new left-wing administration dominated by Castro, which had served the country's formerly strong links with the U.S. by expropriating their economic assets and developing links with the Soviet Union, who the U.S. was then embroiled in the Cold War. The original invasion plan called for 2 strikes against Cuban air bases. A 1,400-man invasion force was disembarked under cover of darkness and launched a surprise attack. Paratroopers dropped in advance of the invasion disrupted transportation and repelled Cuban forces. At the same time, a smaller force landed on the east coast of Cuba to create confusion. The main force would continue across the island to Matanzas and set up a defensive position. The United Revolutionary Front would send leaders from South Florida and establish a provisional government. The success of the plan depended on the Cuban population joining the invaders. On April 15th, 8 CIA-supplied B-26 bombers attacked Cuban airfields and returned to the U.S. On the night of April 26th, the main invasion landed at the beach named Playa Girón in the Bay of Pigs. The Cuban Army's counteroffensive was led by Captain Jose Ramon Fernandez before Castro decided to take personal control of the operation. On April 20th, the invaders finally surrendered, with the majority of troopers being publicly interrogated and then sent back to the U.S. The failed invasion strengthened the position of Castro's administration, who proceeded to openly proclaim their intention to adopt socialism and strengthen ties with the Soviet Union. John Kennedy ordered a number of internal investigations. Across a lot of Latin America, it was celebrated as evidence of the fallibility of the U.S. imperialism. For centuries, Cuba was a part of the Spanish Empire, and in the late 19th century, Cuban nationalist revolutionaries rebelled against Spanish dominance, resulting in 3 liberation wars. The first was the 10 Years' War, 1868 to 1878, then the Little War, 1879 to 1880, and finally the Cuban War of Independence, 1895 to 1898. The brigade prisoners remained in captivity for 20 months as the United States negotiated a deal with Fidel Castro. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy made personal pleas for contributions for pharmaceutical companies and baby manufacturers, and Castro eventually settled on $53 million worth of baby food and medicine in exchange for the prisoners. On December 23, 1962, just 2 months after the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a plane containing the first group of freed prisoners landed in the U.S. A week later, on Saturday, December 29th, surviving brigade members gathered for a ceremony in Miami's Orange Bowl, where the brigade's flag was handed over to President Kennedy. I can assure you that this flag will be returned to this brigade in a free Havana, the President promised. The disaster at the Bay of Pigs had a lasting impact on the Kennedy administration. Determined to make up for the failed invasion, the administration initiated Operation Mongoose, a plan to sabotage and destabilize the Cuban government and economy. The plan included the possibility of assassinating Castro. Almost 50 years later, relations between Castro's Cuba and the U.S. remained strained and tenuous. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it.